here Jesus is speaking to his disciples. A disciple is not above the teacher, nor a slave above the master. It is enough for the disciple to be like the teacher and the slave like the master. If they have called the master of the house Beelzebub, how much more will they malign those of his household? So have no fear of them, for nothing is covered up that will not be uncovered, and nothing secret that will not become known. What I say to you in the dark, tell in the light, and what you hear whispered, proclaim from the housetops. Do not fear those who can kill the body, but cannot kill the soul. Rather, fear him who can destroy both soul and body in hell. Are not 2 sparrows sold for a penny? Yet not one of them will fall to the ground apart from your Father, and even the hairs on your head are all counted. So do not be afraid. You are of more value than many sparrows. Everyone, therefore, who acknowledges me before others, I also will acknowledge before my Father in heaven. But whoever denies me before others, I will also deny before my Father in heaven. Do not think that I have come to bring peace to the earth. I have not come to bring peace, but a sword. For I have come to set a man against his father, and a daughter against her mother, and a daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law. And one's foes will be members of one's own household. Whoever loves father or mother more than me is not worthy of me, and whoever loves son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me. And whoever does not take up the cross and follow me is not worthy of me. Those who find their life will lose it, and those who lose their life for my sake will find it. The word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
Do not think that I have come to bring peace to the earth. Jesus tells all those who would follow him. I have come not to bring peace, but a sword. For I have come to set a man against his father, a daughter against her mother, and a daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law. And one's foes will be members of one's own household. Whoever loves father or mother more than me is not worthy of me. Whoever loves son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me, says our Lord. Are you worthy? The church often complains about the materialism and the consumerism of our society, among other things. But what about these words of Jesus? The sword that Jesus came to bring was the sword of faith, and belief in Christ and following his call is the sword that demands ultimate loyalty, a loyalty that can set one family member against another and turn one's family into one's foes. Are you worthy? Well, if Peter, the other disciples, are any indication, then the answer is no. On the one hand, the disciples had left family and home behind to follow Jesus, but after Jesus' arrest, Peter denied knowing Christ 3 times and fled in fear rather than die on the cross next to Christ. As Christ said, quote, "Whoever denies me before others, I also will deny before my Father in heaven. And whoever does not take up the cross and follow me is not worthy of me." Unquote. The truth is that neither the disciples nor the church is worthy. The truth is that Jesus has every right to deny Peter before his Father in heaven, and Christ has every right to deny us as well. And yet, when the resurrected Christ appeared before the disciples, he did not deny Peter. Again, I'll say it once more. Peter had denied him 3 times. Peter had not taken up his cross and died with Christ on Golgotha. Peter was not worthy. Christ had every right to deny him. Yet the good news is that Jesus chose to not exercise this right. Instead, Christ forgave Peter. Remember, God did not send the Son in the world to condemn the world, but that the world might be saved through him. Don't you see? Neither the disciples nor the church is worthy, but Christ is. Thanks be to God that our salvation is not dependent on our works, which in truth fall short, but on Christ's work, which fulfills every righteousness. Christ is worthy. He is the good shepherd who has laid down his life for the sheep who were lost, but are now found. The risen Christ continues to seek us out when we stray, not to deny us, though he has every right to do so, but instead to make good on his promise to redeem us. So, as Paul asks in his letter to Romans, our first reading this morning, should we continue to sin in order that grace may abound? By no means. The fact that Jesus chooses not to exercise his right to deny us when our actions deny him, as they often do, is not a license to sin. Instead, as Paul goes on to proclaim concerning our baptism, Christ's forgiveness frees us from harmful acts that alienate us from God and one another. Yet for our purposes here, how do we reconcile this freedom that we now have to seek reconciliation with the fact that faith in Christ can turn our own families into our enemies? To understand this seeming contradiction, how faith in Christ can put us in conflict with our parents, say, rather than honor them. I like to use an illustration, one that I've used before. It is a simple notion, but I believe it says it all. If you break a bone, and that bone heals incorrectly, sometime you have to re-break that same bone in order to reset it so that it can heal properly. The same, I believe, is true of relationships and families. All families have harmful or dysfunctional relationships that are often accepted as natural or unavoidable. We may not even be aware of them, or we may know all too well that they are present, but choose instead to pretend that everything is all right. Either way, such relationships must first be broken before they can be reset and true healing can begin. Yet the truth is that most families would rather limp along and even pretend that everything is as it should be rather than endure the pain of change. Still, when one comes to maturity in their faith in Christ, you are free to see your family as it really is. Families, you see, it is families that are a two-edged sword. Families cut both ways. On the one hand, they nurture us and are a source of love that defends us from the many dangers of this world. On the other hand, families are where patterns of abuse, addiction, and brokenness are learned and passed on from generation to generation. Families can defend us and at the same time inflict us with wounds that cut deep. Christ certainly knew this. In the Gospel of Mark, when Jesus began his public ministry, we read that Jesus' family came to restrain him because the crowds were saying that he was out of his mind. Yet Jesus could not be restrained, either then nor now. And led by a mature faith in Christ, we can now see our own families as they really are, not as we imagine them to be. We see them as a place where love can be found, but where you and I are expected to limp along in the same old ways and act as if everything is as good as it could be, even though we now see the truth. You see, faith in Christ gives us the courage to stir the mud, to stop pretending that everything is all right when you know that it is not, to stop bearing the grudges of past generations, to refuse to take sides, to stop enabling the dysfunction of others. And what thanks will you receive when you bring such things to light? Well, comments like these. Why do you hate us so? You never did love me. I always knew you would betray us. So be it. Yet, when you are willing to endure the pain of breaking unhealthy relationships in your own families, you create the possibility over time of family relationships that heal and are stronger for all parties. You can do this. You can do this now. The sword of faith that Christ gives us does not have to be swung wildly. Our side of the conflicts that faith brings into families is not an emotional reaction to a family that won't accept our faith. Instead, as our faith in Christ matures, we learn to use the sword of faith skillfully and intentionally in at least two ways. First, faith in Christ gives you the insight and courage to first see and then tell the truth in love. We don't ask permission from our families to have faith in Christ, and we don't ask permission to bring up family subjects that no one else wants to talk about. Yet rather than backing down because a family member reacts negatively, you can persist because painful truths have to be faced before healing can begin. Second, in addition to telling the truth in love, despite family resistance to hear it, you can follow the call of Christ wherever it leads. Most families have ideas about who you are, the role you play in the family, and even what your vocation in life should be, whether it is best for you or not. God, however, may have other ideas. And when the call of God conflicts with the expectations of one's family, Christ makes the faithful choice clear. Follow the call of God. Now, the reality, of course, is that you may be mistaken. In truth, what you think is the call of God may be a pipe dream, a fantasy, or simply a really bad idea. And your family may see this truth and be right. Or you may be right, and your family may be wrong. God may, in truth, be calling you to a new vocation, a new life, or simply a new direction in life. Sometimes, the only way to find out is to set off in that new direction. If your family is right, that may be a hard reality to face, but their resistance may save you, in the end, a lot of grief. If, however, you are right, then family conflict can serve to test your resolve, affirm your decision when you stick it out, and open the possibility to form new, healthy relationships with your family over time. In these ways, you can, in the long run, strengthen the healthy patterns in your family and change the unhealthy patterns by either refusing to participate in them or offering new, healthier patterns to follow. It all begins with our faith in Christ, which gives us the insight and courage we need to stand up to destructive forces in our family and build on the healthy ones. In the end, loving God more than our families is the most loving thing you can do for them, as well as yourself. Such love of God puts families in perspective. You see, just as Christ did not exercise his right to deny us, you are now free to forgive and no longer have to deny your family, even when they resist your efforts to speak the truth in love or follow your call in Christ. Further, loving God more than your families gives you a vision of how you can change how you relate to them in ways that undermine patterns of brokenness and promote reconciliation. You may not be worthy, but you are forgiven. You are called. And because of the worthiness of Christ, you can do this. You can tell the truth in love and follow the call of Christ. Indeed, when you are loved by God in Christ and love God in return, you can endure the conflicts that such faith in Christ raises in families, refuse to settle for peace that accepts brokenness, and do your part to promote healing. Let all